Scenes of chaos, military tanks, and water cannons rolling down the streets of Santiago, Chile. The revolution happening in plain sight that's getting almost no mainstream media coverage on today's episode of Red Alert. Hello everyone, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a great return to form here for Season 2, but today I'd like to start off by taking you to a crazy situation right now. It's taking place in Chile, where in response to a 4% hike in subway fares, people have taken to the streets in a big way. 5 people died in a fire at a garment factory. There has been violent responses from police shooting at unarmed civilians with their hands up, using water cannons and tear gas. Chile is in chaos right now, and nobody's talking about it. We'll talk about why and what's going on and what broader lessons we can take from this extraordinary movement. Welcome to Red Alert Season 2. My name is Spencer Walsh. So happy to have you here. All right, let's get right into it. And it's really is an incredible situation. It's getting almost no mainstream media coverage. I do want to look into some of what's going on right now, because pre-protest, that is, because if you talk about some of the climate that goes on in Chile right now, they have out of any developed country in the world, Chile has the worst amount of income inequality. They have a billionaire right-wing president, sound familiar? I guess so, that has pushed for much higher rates of privatization, and pretty much basically our right, the right in Chile is pretty much the kind of equivalent of a very neoliberal outlook, kind of like a centrist outlook here in the United States. That's really how far right-wing we are in comparison to countries like Latin America. But that president has really pushed forward increased rate of privatization, and this fare hike, as well as the really increasing amount of income inequality, in the sense that has been happening around the globe, of the working class getting squeezed out of a lot of power by the ruling class. We saw this happening in France, and it's really always over some sort of transportation price raise. For example, the Gilets jaunes in France with the gas price raise and the carbon tax that was going to be planned. It is a huge theme right now, and it really is incredible to watch pretty much an uprising in a really violent way, and the violent response that the government has taken. The president there has declared war, deploying 9,500 men on these protesters to calm them down. It is really an absolutely insane situation. We're going to go through it for you right now here. So this all, as I said, started when that billionaire right-wing president, Sebastián Piñera, decided to raise taxes, or not taxes, but raise the subway fare for public transportation in Santiago and across the country. And it's not a lot of money, but as a local politician there, Francisco Perales of Convergencia Social, which is a left-wing party, as she explained, it really was significant to these people.
First, the recent riots started after Piñera raised the subway fare in Santiago. It's a really low fare. It's really low. It's not a lot of money, but it's really significant because here in Chile we have a really low minimum wage, and we have people that go out to the subway every day and have to travel for about 2 hours to get to their jobs. So it's really significant, that raise in the subway fare. So after that happened, the students called to evade payment, generating great acceptance in the public eye. They started evading everywhere, in every subway station, and the people started joining them in that evasion. So afterwards, the government responded, deploying policemen in every subway station to repress these acts. They started beating the children. They started filling the subway stations with a lot of policemen. And I think they thought this was enough to contain the protest, but it wasn't. So after that, the people in every city of the country, in every big city of the country, started to go out to the streets to protest and broadened the protest all around the country, reflecting years of injustice in different types of things.
The truth is that in Chile, things not just, really obviously before the hike in the fare, things have not really been good. Wait times for healthcare have been increasing steadily, and Piñera's government of elites is really out of touch with the economic realities of everyday Chileans, and that is a big part of the current economic crisis that they face today. In response to long wait times at hospitals, his Assistant Secretary of Healthcare Networks, Luis Castillo, suggested that people show up early to health centers to socialize while waiting to be seen, because going to the doctor, what do you want to do? You just want to talk, right? That's a normal thing to do. And his economic minister, Juan Andrés Fontaine, suggested that workers get up before dawn to avoid rush hour fares in response to the recent price increase. Meanwhile, that guy's probably talking from a mansion. So, that is the kind of really economic disparity that's really prevalent with the Chilean people. That is a big part of the story, and a big, broader sense, a common trend, especially among Latin America. It's this response from a relatively neoliberal center-right in the United States government was nothing but outrage. The quote, "We are at war," has only fanned the flames of popular opposition. Despite this bellicose rhetoric, and in contrast to the government's characterization of the mass mobilizations, the mood on the streets of Chile is energetic, optimistic, and at times exuberant. "We are filled with hope," says one protester, because instead of fearful reactions, people on the streets are saying that Chile has finally woken up after years of abuse from neoliberal politics. That is a very, very powerful thing, to get the sense of 1 million people in the street and pissed about what their government has been doing to them. It's a very, very powerful thing that really cannot be ignored for at least a very long time. It's going to be interesting to see what outcome this might have. The Chilean people are, among other things, demanding an end to private pension systems. Again, we talked about the increasing privatization along all sectors of the economy, reduction of the work week to 40 hours, deprivatizing water, a new labor code, fixing the public health system through direct financing to public healthcare institutions, strengthening public education at all levels, making public transportation free, and starting a new constitutional process through a constituent assembly. And that, I think, really is going to come in, especially that labor code would be incredibly helpful, because as that politician said there, Francisca Perales of Convergencia Social said, the minimum wage there is very, very low, and that makes it so much harder for everyday Chileans to survive. And that is really what life looks like in a neoliberal state. It's not fascism, it's not white supremacy, it's not people on the streets, it's a slow, crushing death, prick by prick by prick, really a death by 1,000 cuts of austerity, of cuts to this, privatization of that. And it's so interesting to see that across the globe, and especially really in Chile, people are deciding to finally fight back and try to shed some of these pricks that have been continually put on by creeping neoliberalism. It really is one of the most direct refutations, and really violent and aggressive refutations of the elite that have happened. And you have to wonder some of the conditions that, and really the fact that this government, they don't have to look too far to figure out why the people are in the streets. It's because the fact they cannot take it anymore. This is a big sacrifice a lot of these people are making to get out there in the streets, risking a lot of violence. And the really obvious thing here is that the elites, the billionaire class that is currently in power in Chile, is not letting things go down without a fight. Like, they're not just going to sit back, roll over, and kind of let things happen, you know? And the number of troops that they're deploying, the tanks, the tear gas, the water cannons, that really shows it. It's no walk in the park. It's no pleasure cruise for these people to be out there. And things really never will be the same until this military repression and this high amount of blowback from the government ends, as Francisca Paredes, again, of Convergencia Social, explains here.
Because they are only adding to the violence. Right now we have curfews. We can't go out to the streets after 7 p.m. We have like 10,000 militaries deployed in the country, and they have been beating and firing their weapons against the people, even though there are a lot of people that are really peaceful, protesting really peacefully in the streets. So I think I'm actually like 34 years old, so I didn't live the dictatorship. But for some people who lived the dictatorship, these days resemble those days. And we think that this is not how a democracy works, and we want the democracy to be restored.
Francisca, I want to bring our other guest into the conversation, Professor Andra Chastain.
So that is a clip there from Democracy Now! Of them really explaining what is the kind of brutality, and really unfair brutality of this military response from the Piñera government, and that's obviously to Democracy Now! Had to put a little bit of Amy Goodman in there. In response to the mounting pressure from this mass popular uprising. And I mean, it's really hard to ignore when you got people out in the streets, especially if they happen to be a little bit more the aggressive, violent side. It's very, very hard to ignore them once things kind of reach a critical mass. Notice the Gilets jaunes protests. In recent days, Piñera has released a new social agenda that includes concessions such as pension reforms, as we talked about how they wanted, a guaranteed minimum income, and taxes on the wealthy. By the way, the minimum wage in the country is only $6,600 a year is what it comes out to, U.S.-wise. It's $550 a month they're making, which is insane in an American context. But protesters, they really, as we talked about, for the Frente Amplio, which is a left-wing party, and those protesters out there, those reforms are a non-starter, again, till the military ends. People, Parada says, will not stop mobilizing only for promises and speeches. The citizens have already spoken, and the only possible way out of this crisis for the government to respond to popular demands aimed at overcoming the precariousness of life. And that's really what life is in this kind of neoliberal state that these people have created, with a just extreme amount. And if you look at what's going on here, it's hard to see. Like, I mean, some of this stuff really does sound familiar. Like, the massive amounts of income inequality happening, and for a lot of the same reasons, like, it's hard to not say that, like, at least under a Democratic presidency, I mean, granted, Republicanism, or the Republican way, we are headed for a bit of a worse future. But to put things mildly, like, Chile is probably at a better track, honestly, than we are right now. But, like, with the devastating social blend of kind of what we get from the right and the popular consensus on the American Democratic Party and the Republican Party about the way things should be run, in terms of taxes, privatization, stuff like that, like, we are headed onto a not so dissimilar track from Chile, which I think is pretty interesting to look at here. When the National Congress reduced their own bloated salaries in response to massive mobilizations, Convergencia Social Deputy Diego Ibanez commented, "Without the social mobilization, this would not be possible." So it wouldn't happen. Like, their salaries would not have gone down without the protests, showing the real importance of the way these things go on. You may have heard me reference throughout this episode about violence on both sides, but if just based on what I've been seeing, but I've been doing some research on this topic, obviously in preparation for the show.